The bruise bloomed like a violet flower beneath the sleeve of Sarah's blouse. Just a glimpse, there and gone, as she reached for the sugar bowl across my kitchen table. 3 weeks since I'd called the police, 3 weeks since I'd seen my sister. Now she sat across from me, her eyes hollow, refusing to look at mine. She whispered that I had no right at all, stirring her untouched coffee with meticulous precision. Her words hung in the air between us as rain pelted against the windows, echoing the rhythm of my heartbeat. The custody papers lay on the table, stark white against the dark wood, edges crisp and official. Final. When I murmured about protection, Sarah's laugh emerged brittle, like ice cracking underfoot. Protection, she said, was something I clearly didn't understand. I didn't understand then. I couldn't have known what she'd endured, or why. I couldn't have known about the photograph hidden in the lining of her jewelry box, or the letters locked in a safety deposit box across town. I couldn't have known about the pact she'd made 15 years earlier, before she ever met Robert. But I was about to find out. The first time I suspected something was wrong was at my father's funeral, 3 years ago. Sarah arrived late, slipping into the back row of the church just as the minister began to speak. Robert, her husband of 7 years, kept his hand firmly at the small of her back, guiding her movements with subtle pressure. Something in the way she carried herself, shoulders hunched, steps hesitant, triggered a long-dormant protective instinct. When I finally reached her during the reception, I whispered questions about her tardiness, mentioning our mother's concerned search. Sarah's smile appeared too carefully arranged, as if practiced in the car mirror before entering. She blamed highway traffic, her explanation brief and rehearsed. The high-necked black dress seemed out of place in the summer heat, her makeup noticeably heavier around her eyes. Robert materialized at her shoulder bearing 2 wine glasses. He acknowledged me with a curt nod while passing a glass to my sister, remarking on the impressive turnout for what he called, your father. When I automatically corrected him, our father, something flashed in Sarah's eyes, a warning I couldn't decipher. His smile never reached his eyes as he agreed, noting Sarah's supposed distress throughout the week. My sister's hand trembled slightly as she took a long sip of wine, offering only a murmured acknowledgement of the difficult days. Robert's fingers curled around her elbow, announcing their need to circulate and pay respects, his grip guiding her away before I could respond. I watched them move through the crowd, noting how Sarah seemed to anticipate Robert's movements before he made them, adjusting her posture and pace to match his. It reminded me of a dance where one partner was always a half-beat behind, constantly trying to avoid missteps. Later, I found Sarah alone in our father's study, staring at the family photographs arranged on his desk. "Remember the summer house on Lake Champlain?" she asked without turning. "When Dad taught us to swim." "You were fearless," I said, moving to stand beside her. "I always waited in inch by inch, but you just run straight into the deep water." "Not fearless," Sarah whispered. "Just different fears." In the dim light of the study, with the sounds of the reception muted by heavy oak doors, I noticed the careful way she held herself, as if breathing too deeply might cause pain. As I began carefully inquiring about her well-being, Robert's voice sliced through our moment like a blade. From the doorway, his pleasant expression contradicted the coldness in his eyes as he announced their imminent departure, citing Lucy's school schedule for the following day. Lucy, Sarah's daughter, my 11-year-old niece, appeared beside him, her small face solemn beneath her dark bangs. Mother and daughter exchanged a look I couldn't interpret, some silent communication passing between them. Sarah straightened her spine in response, acquiescing immediately. Her hand reached out, gripping mine with unexpected urgency as she extracted a promise for more frequent visits, mentioning Lucy's supposed longing for my presence. At Robert's throat clearing, she released my hand with the swiftness of someone touching a hot stove. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. In images from 5 years ago, Sarah laughed openly, her face turned toward the camera. In more recent pictures, she always seemed to be looking slightly away, as if watching for something just outside the frame. I told myself I was imagining things, projecting my grief over Dad's death onto my sister's marriage. But a seed of unease had been planted, taking root in the fertile soil of my suspicion. After the funeral, I made good on my promise to visit more often. I drove the 40 minutes to Sarah and Robert's suburban home at least twice a month, bringing books for Lucy and attempting to reconnect with the sister who had once been my closest confidant. Robert was unfailingly polite during these visits, his corporate lawyer demeanor never slipping. He asked questions about my work as a child psychologist, nodded at appropriate intervals, smiled at the right moments. Perfect hosting, perfect manners, and yet, something about him made my skin crawl. Over dinner 6 months after Dad's funeral, Marcus suggested I might be projecting my concerns onto Sarah's marriage. He reminded me of my historical suspicions regarding her relationships, particularly the philosophy major from college whom I'd accused of manipulation. When I insisted on the validity of those past concerns, citing how that boyfriend had exploited her for academic gain, Marcus gently countered that Sarah had eventually recognized the situation herself and ended the relationship without my intervention. His fingers reached across the table for mine as I described how Sarah seemed to diminish in Robert's presence, literally shrinking before my eyes. Marcus drew parallels to normal social adaptations, how people naturally modulate their behavior in different contexts. My frustrated response distinguished between social adaptations and fear-based responses. His sigh preceded the inevitable question about concrete evidence, whether I'd witnessed anything that definitively indicated abuse rather than merely uncomfortable dynamics. I hadn't, not then. Just the growing distance in my sister's eyes, the way conversation stopped when Robert entered a room, the careful way Lucy watched her father, tracking his moods like a meteorologist tracks storm systems. Then came Lucy's 12th birthday party. Sarah had invited me to help with preparations, asking me to arrive early while Robert was out golfing. We were hanging streamers in the dining room when Lucy came downstairs in her party dress, twirling to show off the silver shoes Sarah had bought her. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, her smile genuine for the first time in months. Lucy beamed, then froze as the sound of a car door slammed in the driveway. "Dad's home early," she said, the joy evaporating from her face. "It's okay," Sarah said quickly, her hand moving to smooth her own dress. "Everything looks perfect." Robert's entrance announced itself through clattering golf clubs against the back door before he appeared, his voice carrying deceptive lightness as he questioned the festive scene. Sarah's answer came pitched slightly higher than normal, a mere confirmation of finishing decorations. His appearance in the doorway brought immediate tension as his eyes narrowed at the elaborate setup, deeming it excessive for a child's celebration. My impulsive defense of their choices earned his tightened smile and pointed reminder of my outsider status in what he considered family matters. His attention shifted to Lucy's footwear, declaring the silver shoes inappropriate and instructing her to change into his white selection. The silent question in Lucy's eyes sought her mother's guidance. Sarah's soft defense of the silver shoes, mentioning both their aesthetic coordination with the dress and Lucy's preference, triggered something hard in Robert's expression. His reminder of previous discussions on the matter hung in the air like a threat. Sarah's shoulders tensed visibly as the atmosphere thinned around us. The moment of potential defiance passed quickly, replaced by acquiescence as she instructed Lucy to change, falsely praising the alternative footwear. After Lucy's departure upstairs, Robert's lecture on family boundaries made his dismissal of my presence clear. Sarah's barely audible mention of having invited me herself earned her his intimidating proximity, his back strategically positioned to block my view. Whatever quiet exchange followed resulted in Sarah's whispered retraction and confirmation of my imminent departure. As I gathered my purse, burning with indignation, I saw Robert's hand close around Sarah's wrist, his thumb pressing into the tender skin on the underside. Not hard enough to leave a mark, Robert was too careful for that, but enough to convey a message. Outside in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I called Marcus. "You need to talk to her directly," he said after listening to my account. "Ask her outright if she needs help." I tried. The next day, I called Sarah and asked her to meet me for coffee without Robert. She agreed, but when she arrived at the cafe, her demeanor was distant, defensive. My carefully chosen expression of concern regarding Robert's treatment of her and Lucy the previous day met with immediate defensiveness. Sarah's mechanical stirring of her latte continued uninterrupted as she dismissed my observations, attributing his behavior to strong parenting opinions and normal marital disagreements. When I distinguished between disagreement and control, her spoon clinked harshly against the cup. Her admonishment about my supposed expectations for marriages preceded my blunt inquiry about potential physical harm. The darting of her eyes to neighboring tables and hushed demand for discretion offered more confirmation than her words. Her eventual admission of complexity characterized Robert's behavior as frustration resulting from unmet expectations. My naming of abuse, the actual word, caused a visible flinch before her denial and workplace pressure justification. Any further pursuit of the topic met with a sharp command to stop, immediately followed by a softened plea invoking both her welfare and Lucy's as reasons for my silence. I didn't drop it. Over the next few months, I paid closer attention, documenting every concerning interaction, every unexplained bruise, every last-minute cancellation. I researched domestic violence, consulted with colleagues who specialized in abuse cases, and slowly built a case file that I hoped would convince Sarah to leave. Then came the night that changed everything. A frantic call from Lucy at nearly midnight, her voice small and terrified. Lucy's frantic midnight call described her mother's state after a supposed fall down the stairs, unresponsive, with a visibly deformed arm. The fear in her young voice propelled me through traffic laws to their residence, where I found Sarah sprawled semi-conscious on the living room couch, her arm bent at an impossible angle. Robert's perfectly composed concern from the kitchen doorway matched his smooth explanation about a trip over Lucy's school bag and his imminent plans for medical transport. In the corner, Lucy's pale face and fixed stare on her mother's bruised features told a different story altogether. My announcement about calling emergency services met immediate resistance from Robert, whose insistence on driving her himself carried ominous undertones. His dangerous expression emerged at my pointed skepticism regarding additional falls that might occur under his supervision. Lucy's barely audible revelation about her mother's demand for secrecy, extracted as a promise, confirmed every suspicion. The ambulance arrived within minutes. As the paramedics assessed Sarah, I pulled Lucy aside, kneeling to meet her eyes. My quiet inquiry about Robert's potential role in Sarah's injuries prompted an immediate nervous glance toward where he conversed with paramedics. Lucy's whispered denial of direct observation came paired with crucial context. She'd been in her room when arguments about some letter escalated suddenly into a loud crash. My follow-up question about this mysterious correspondence never received its answer, as Robert materialized beside us with convenient timing, dispatching Lucy to collect her mother's belongings for the hospital visit. After the ambulance took Sarah away, with Robert following in his car, I drove Lucy to my apartment. She was silent during the ride, clutching her backpack to her chest like armor. "You're safe now," I told her as I unlocked my door. "You can stay here as long as you need to." Lucy looked up at me, her eyes too old for her 12 years. "Mom made me promise never to tell." "Tell what, sweetheart?" "About Dad. About the rules." That night, as Lucy slept in my spare bedroom, I made the call to the police. By morning, Robert was in custody, and Sarah was awake in the hospital, her arm in a cast and her eyes filled with a fury I'd never seen before. Her seething accusation greeted my entrance to the hospital room, a furious indictment of my presumption and ignorance of consequences. My assertion of protection for both her and Lucy prompted harsh laughter that echoed unnaturally in the sterile environment. Her counterclaim struck deep, that my intervention had actually destroyed everything she'd carefully constructed, everything endured for Lucy's safety. My insistence on their newfound security received only cold dismissal as she turned her face toward the window, commanding my immediate departure with silent finality. That was the last time she spoke to me. After her discharge from the hospital, she took Lucy and moved in with our mother. The protective order against Robert remained in place, but 3 weeks later, Sarah dropped the charges. Despite my testimony and Lucy's reluctant statement to a child welfare officer, there wasn't enough evidence to proceed without Sarah's cooperation. 2 months after that, I received the text message asking me to meet her at my house. The message that led to her sitting across from me now, custody papers between us, telling me I had ruined everything. Sarah finally raised her eyes from the untouched coffee, demanding complete attention, genuine listening without interruption, judgment, or assumed superior understanding. Outside, intensified rain drummed against the roof with the persistence of impatient fingers tapping. My silent nod suppressed the barrage of questions accumulated during weeks of silence. Her mention of Michael Reeves struck with physical force. The name alone conjured memories of Sarah's college relationship, her first serious love, nearly 2 years of apparent happiness before their sudden, never-explained separation. My careful acknowledgement masked the shock while questioning the relevance to our current situation. Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached into her purse, withdrawing a worn envelope. From it, she extracted a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a younger Sarah, perhaps 19 or 20, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Her expression was a complex mixture of love and despair. "I don't understand," I said, studying the image. Sarah had never mentioned a pregnancy, never shown signs of. The realization struck like lightning. "Lucy," I whispered. Sarah nodded. "Michael is Lucy's biological father, but Lucy's 12. This would have been 15 years ago," Sarah confirmed. 7 months after Michael and I broke up. 3 years before I met Robert. My mind raced, trying to align this new information with the history I thought I knew. You told everyone Lucy was born premature. That's why we couldn't visit right away. You said you met Robert at a grief support group after Dad's heart attack, that it was a whirlwind romance. I met Robert at a court-mandated anger management class, Sarah said flatly. I was there because I'd gotten into a physical altercation with Michael. Robert was there because his ex-wife had a restraining order against him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah, why didn't you tell me any of this? Because Michael threatened to kill me if I kept the baby. Sarah's voice was eerily calm now, as if reciting facts about a stranger. He had already put me in the hospital twice. The last time, I was 8 weeks pregnant, but I didn't know it yet. When I found out, I ran. Changed my phone number, moved cities, told everyone I was studying abroad. I remembered that year, the sporadic emails, the vague postcards supposedly from Barcelona, the lack of details about her experiences. I'd been so wrapped up in my own graduate studies that I hadn't questioned her story. I had Lucy in a small hospital 3 hours from here, using Mom's maiden name. I was terrified Michael would find us. He had friends in the police department. His father was a judge. But eventually you came home, I said. I had to. I ran out of money, and Lucy needed stability. I changed our names legally, Sarah Thompson, Lucy Thompson. I was careful, but I was always looking over my shoulder. And Robert? Where does he fit into all this? Sarah's mouth twisted. Robert recognized me at that anger management class. He'd been an intern at the DA's office when I tried to press charges against Michael the first time. He remembered the case, remembered that Michael walked free because his father called in favors. She took a shuddering breath. Robert offered protection. He had connections of his own, he said. He knew people who could help keep Lucy and me hidden if I ever needed to run again. And he seemed kind. But he wasn't, I said softly. No, Sarah admitted. Not for long. But by the time I realized what he really wanted, control, obedience, someone to validate his power, we were already married. Lucy called him Dad. We had the perfect cover story. And Michael? What happened to him? Sarah's eyes darkened. He found us when Lucy was 7. Showed up at her school one day, told the office he was her uncle. Thank God the principal called me to verify before releasing her. My breath caught. What did you do? I did what I had to do. I reminded Robert of his promise to protect us. He hired private security, helped me get an unlisted number, moved us to the house in the gated community. And in exchange? In exchange, I became the wife he wanted. I followed his rules. I didn't complain when he... Sarah gestured vaguely at her arm in its cast. You traded one abuser for another. The realization made me sick. I traded an unpredictable danger for a predictable one, Sarah corrected. Michael wouldn't have stopped at hitting me. He told me exactly what he would do if I ever had his child. With Robert, as long as I played my part, Lucy was safe. I thought about the careful way Lucy moved around her father, the way she watched him. Does Lucy know? About Michael? Sarah shook her head. She knows Robert isn't her biological father, but I told her that her real father died before she was born. It seemed kinder than the truth. And the letter Lucy mentioned? The night you fell? Something shifted in Sarah's expression. 3 weeks before that night, I received a letter from the state prison. Michael was arrested for attempting to kill his new girlfriend. He's serving 15 years. She let out a long breath. For the first time, I thought maybe we could be free, both of us. So you confronted Robert. I told him I wanted a divorce. That with Michael in prison, we didn't need his protection anymore. I could imagine the scene, Sarah gathering her courage, Robert's rage at losing control. He said he'd fight for custody, Sarah continued. Said he had documentation of my mental instability, that I was an unfit mother. He had recordings of our arguments, manipulated to make me sound unstable. He had the resources to drag it out in court for years. That's when he pushed you down the stairs. Yes. The single syllable hung between us. And now? I asked, gesturing to the custody papers. Now Robert is claiming that I'm mentally unstable, that I invented the abuse to cover my own violent tendencies. His lawyer is painting me as a pathological liar who has turned my daughter against him. He has character witnesses, neighbors, colleagues, even our family doctor, all testifying to what a devoted father he is. That's insane, I protested. What about the hospital records? Lucy's statement. The medical report says the injuries could be consistent with a fall. And Lucy has recanted her statement. Robert's lawyer got to her somehow. My instinctive reach for her hand accompanied my plea to help rectify the situation. Sarah's prolonged evaluation preceded her decisive action, providing detailed instructions for accessing a hidden key beneath her jewelry box drawer at our mother's house, corresponding to a specific safety deposit box downtown. The paper she slid across the table contained only a numeric sequence, the essential access code. To my inquiry about contents, her steady voice described a comprehensive archive, journal entries documenting Robert's systemic abuse, photographic evidence, surreptitiously obtained audio recordings, years of medical documentation. The collection extended to Michael as well, police reports, hospital records from his assaults, written threats predating Lucy's birth. Her direct gaze emphasized the destructive power of this assembled evidence against both men. My question about her restraint in using these materials elicited the core truth. Publicity would devastate Lucy most of all. The exposure would reveal every painful reality: Michael's threats, Robert's abuse, Sarah's years of protective deception. The child would lose both father figures simultaneously in the most traumatic possible manner. Sarah's tear-filled eyes underscored her previous willingness to endure personal suffering to shield Lucy from these painful truths. Now, Robert's legal maneuvers had eliminated that option. My verbalization of his strategic trap earned simple confirmation as I studied the custody documents with new understanding, the clarity emerging with the cold illumination of winter sunrise. My final question required no elaboration. What action did she need from me? The safety deposit box contained exactly what Sarah had described: a meticulously organized chronicle of systematic abuse spanning 15 years and 2 men. Journal entries in Sarah's neat handwriting detailed Robert's escalating control, the isolation tactics, the calculated humiliation. Hospital records documented injuries explained away as accidents. Small voice recorders held snippets of Robert's rage, his threats delivered in the same measured tone he used at dinner parties. A separate folder contained the Michael Reeves history, police reports that went nowhere, photographs of bruises around Sarah's throat, medical records detailing a miscarriage at 6 weeks following a fall, handwritten threats on hotel stationery. A restraining order that had been mysteriously lifted. Most shocking was a letter from Michael dated just after Lucy's birth, somehow having discovered Sarah's location. If I can't have you, no one will. If I ever see that mistake of a child, I'll end both of you. My father will make sure I walk away clean, just like before. I spent hours organizing the evidence, consulting with a lawyer friend about the best approach. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Not much time, but perhaps enough. I waited outside the courthouse on the morning of the hearing, the evidence secured in a locked briefcase. Sarah had given me clear instructions: be prepared to use everything if necessary, but wait for her signal. Robert arrived first, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his lawyer at his side. He spotted me and hesitated before approaching. "Emma," he acknowledged with a nod. "I'm surprised Sarah has you running errands for her now. After your intervention." "I'm here to support my sister," I replied evenly. "Family sticks together during difficult times." Something ugly flickered across his face. "Is that what you call falsely accusing a man of abusing his wife?" "Family support. We both know what happened in that house, Robert." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "What I know is that your sister is mentally unstable, with a history of fabricating stories for attention. What I know is that Lucy needs stability and structure, not Sarah's emotional chaos." "You won't win," I said with more confidence than I felt. Robert's smile was cold. "I already have. Your niece gave her statement to the court yesterday. She confirmed that her mother's stories about me are lies, that she feels safe in my care. The judge has the psychological evaluation confirming Sarah's paranoid tendencies." Before I could respond, I spotted Sarah walking up the courthouse steps, my mother beside her. Sarah wore a simple navy dress, her arm out of the cast but still held carefully against her body. Lucy walked slightly behind them, her expression unreadable. When Lucy saw me, she broke away from her grandmother and ran toward me. Robert moved to intercept her, but stopped when he noticed a court officer watching nearby. Lucy's fierce whisper came with an urgent embrace, her need to communicate something vital evident in every tense muscle. Robert's superficially pleasant voice carried unmistakable warning as he called for her to join him. Her momentary delay came with unwavering eye contact as she discreetly transferred a small USB drive into my palm, explaining its surreptitious origin, a recording she'd made during Robert's visit to her grandmother's house, captured without her mother's knowledge. As my fingers closed around the tiny device, she hurriedly explained its contents: Robert's explicit threat to reveal traumatic truths about her biological father if Sarah maintained abuse allegations. His specific threat involved exposing both the man's monstrous nature and Lucy's genetic connection to him. Her voice trembled with the devastating question about her biological father's character, whether she truly descended from a monster. The heartbreaking inquiry found no immediate answer as Robert materialized behind her, his possessive hand claiming her shoulder while insisting on their immediate entry to the courthouse. Lucy's nearly imperceptible flinch preceded her instant transformation into compliant daughter, features reorganizing into careful neutrality as she acknowledged his authority. As they walked away, I caught Sarah's eye across the courthouse steps. She had watched the entire exchange, her expression a complex mixture of fear and determination. I held up the USB drive slightly, just enough for her to see. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Inside the courtroom, I slipped the drive to Sarah's lawyer with a hastily scribbled note explaining its contents. Within minutes, the lawyer requested a brief recess to review new evidence, and the judge granted a 30-minute delay. In a small conference room, we huddled around a laptop, listening to Robert's voice, smooth, reasonable, yet unmistakably threatening. "If you don't withdraw your claims, Lucy will learn everything," his recorded voice said. "Every sordid detail about Michael Reeves. How he beat you, how he threatened to kill his own child, how his blood runs in her veins. Is that what you want? For her to know she's the daughter of a monster? You promised to protect her," Sarah's recorded voice replied. "That was our agreement. The agreement was that you would be a proper wife. You broke that the moment you went to the police." The recording continued for another minute, Robert laying out in precise detail what would happen if Sarah proceeded with her abuse claims. How he would ensure Lucy learned the truth in the most devastating way possible. How he would use his connections to destroy Sarah financially, professionally, personally. When it ended, Sarah's lawyer looked at her with new understanding. "This changes everything," she said, combined with the evidence from the safety deposit box. Lucy's unexpected voice from the doorway startled everyone. Her silent entry had gone completely unnoticed. Sarah's immediate protest accompanied her protective rise from the chair, but encountered the immovable determination in her daughter's expression. The girl's insistence on knowing the complete truth came with the assertion of her maturity beyond childhood. The weight of 15 years of protective deception hung visible in my sister's eyes as our gazes met. My gentle suggestion acknowledged the inevitable moment of revelation, emphasizing the critical difference between disclosure under her control versus Robert's destructive exposure. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the new evidence. Robert sat rigid at the defendant's table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Sarah and Lucy sat together, hands clasped tightly between them. I watched my niece's profile, marveling at her composure after everything she had learned in the judge's chambers. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was heavy with controlled anger. "The court finds substantial evidence of ongoing domestic abuse by the defendant, Robert Harrington. Furthermore, the attempt to use the minor child's biological parentage as leverage constitutes emotional abuse and attempted parental alienation." She turned her gaze directly to Robert. "Custody is awarded solely to Sarah Thompson, with a permanent restraining order against Mr. Harrington. The court also recommends criminal charges be pursued for witness intimidation and violation of the previous protective order." Outside the courthouse, under a sky finally cleared of rain, Sarah embraced me for the first time since that night in the hospital. "I'm sorry," I whispered against her hair, "for not understanding, for not seeing the whole picture." "You saw enough," she replied, pulling back to look at me. "More than I wanted anyone to see." Lucy stood nearby, her face tilted toward the sun, something like peace beginning to settle over her features. She had listened to the sanitized version of her origins with remarkable steadiness, asking direct questions about both Michael and Robert. In the end, she had hugged her mother and said simply, "You protected me the best way you knew how." As we descended the courthouse steps, my question about their path forward received Sarah's simple yet profound response about collective healing. Her reaching hand found Lucy's waiting grasp, their intertwined fingers symbolic as they moved together into the waiting sunlight, finally emerging from years shadowed by silent pacts and impossible choices. 1 year later, I stand in the doorway of Sarah's new apartment, watching as Lucy arranges photographs on the living room wall. School pictures, holiday snapshots, candid moments of 3 generations of women, my mother, Sarah, Lucy, and me. A family rebuilt. Sarah hands me a cup of coffee, following my gaze to her daughter. "She's talking about changing her name when she turns 18, she says quietly. "Not back to Reeves, never that, but maybe to Woodward. Dad's name. Carrying on the family legacy, I observe. A better legacy than the alternatives." Lucy has been seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma, working through the complex emotions of learning her origin story. Sarah joined her for some sessions, finally unburdening herself of the weight she'd carried alone for so long. Robert's case is slowly moving through the criminal justice system, delayed by his expensive lawyers and procedural maneuvers. Michael remains in prison, unaware that his threats have finally lost their power. My question about potential regrets, specifically her years of silence, receives thoughtful consideration as her fingers trace contemplative patterns around her mug's rim. Her eventual response distinguishes between regretting her solitary burden and her unwavering commitment to protecting Lucy, even from painful realities. Her clear, direct gaze emphasizes the profound observation that truth itself sometimes functions as another form of confinement. My simple prompt about their present circumstances elicits her metaphorical description of their new existence, lives characterized by open doors, liberated from both secrecy and silent suffering. Outside, spring sunlight filters through new leaves, casting dappled shadows across the floor. Lucy calls us over to see the completed photo wall, her face alight with pride. In this moment, watching my sister and niece stand side by side in the light, I understand at last what Sarah meant all those years ago in our father's study. Not fearless, just different fears. And finally, the courage to face them together.